20 years ago, a billionaire destroyed my mother's life with three cruel words. Today, I own his empire, his mansion, and his legacy. He begged me for mercy, but karma doesn't negotiate. This is the story of how a broken promise became the sweetest revenge ever served cold. If you believe karma always finds its way, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories of justice served. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. I'm Cameron Williams, and I'm worth $3.2 billion. Right now, I'm sitting in what used to be Victor Blackwood's corner office, looking out over the city skyline that once belonged to him. The mahogany desk where he crushed dreams is now mine. But this story isn't about my success. It's about justice 25 years in the making. When I was 8 years old, I'd wake up to the sound of my mother, Diane, getting ready for work at 4 in the morning. She cleaned houses for wealthy families, her hands permanently stained from industrial bleach, scrubbing marble floors that cost more than our yearly rent. We lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in East Cleveland. Thin walls, broken heating, and some nights I'd hear her crying softly when she thought I was asleep. But my mother had this incredible way of making our poverty feel temporary, like we were just passing through on our way to something better. "Education is your ticket out of here, baby," she'd tell me every morning, packing my lunch in a worn paper bag. She worked 3 jobs to keep me in the better school district, even though it meant we survived on beans and rice most nights. Everything changed when I was 12. My mother started cleaning for Victor Blackwood, a real estate mogul who owned a 50-room mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. To Victor, my mother was invisible, just another piece of furniture in his world of excess. But my mother saw something different when she worked there. She saw patterns, opportunities, the way successful people operated. For 3 years, she'd been saving every extra dollar in a coffee can under her bed. $8,000. It represented every sacrifice we'd made. But she also had something else, a business plan. Not just dreams, but actual spreadsheets written in her careful handwriting, projected costs, potential clients, marketing strategies. "I'm going to ask Mr. Blackwood for a business loan," she announced one evening, her eyes brighter than I'd seen them in years. $50,000 to start my own professional cleaning company. I've been watching these other companies, and I know I can do it better. The hope in her voice was everything to me. The way she stood taller when she talked about her business plan. For the first time since my father left us, I saw my mother allowing herself to dream about something bigger than survival. The day she planned to approach Victor, she put on her best dress, navy blue from Goodwill but professionally tailored. She looked confident and powerful, carrying her business proposal like it held the key to our future. When she came home that evening, she was practically glowing with excitement. Victor had actually listened to her presentation, asked thoughtful questions about her projections, and seemed genuinely impressed. "He said he'd think about it," she told me, unable to sit still. "But Cameron, he's hosting a charity gala next week at the country club. He asked me to attend and said we'd discuss the partnership then." A partnership, not just a loan, but an actual business partnership with one of the city's most powerful men. My mother spent the entire week preparing, researching similar arrangements, and even bought an elegant black dress for the gala. She was going to be more than the help. She was going to be Victor Blackwood's business partner. The night of the gala, I helped her get ready. She looked absolutely stunning, carrying herself with quiet confidence. I was so proud of her, so certain that all our struggles were finally going to be worth it. I stayed up until midnight waiting to hear about our new future. But when our apartment door opened, I knew immediately that something was catastrophically wrong. My mother stood there still in that beautiful black dress, but her makeup was smudged from tears, and she looked like something inside her had been fundamentally broken. It took her over an hour to find the words to tell me what Victor had done. He had called her onto the main stage during his speech, in front of 300 of the city's most influential people. She had walked up there thinking he was going to announce their partnership, maybe introduce her as his newest associate. Instead, Victor used my mother as entertainment for his wealthy friends. "Ladies and gentlemen," he had said into the microphone, his voice carrying clearly across the elegant ballroom, "I want to share something quite amusing with you tonight. Earlier this week, my housekeeper approached me with what she called a business proposal. The crowd began to chuckle, sensing a setup. She actually wanted me to invest $50,000 in her cleaning company. Can you imagine the audacity? The laughter grew louder as my mother stood on that stage, the horrible realization dawning that she wasn't the business partner. She was the punchline to Victor's cruel joke. I told her exactly what I tell everyone who gets confused about their place in this world, Victor continued, his eyes deliberately cruel as he looked at my mother. Some people are meant to stay in service. Some people need to stay in service. Three words that would haunt us forever. Stay in service. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause while my mother somehow made it off that stage and out of that ballroom. But the damage was already done. Victor had taken her most vulnerable moment and turned it into amusement for people who would never understand what it meant to scrape for 3 years, just for a chance. The cruelty didn't end that night. Within a week, my mother began losing her other clients. Word traveled fast through wealthy circles, and Victor had made it clear that Diane Williams was getting above her station. One by one, families found reasons to let her go. Our financial situation became desperate. We couldn't make rent, had to move to an even worse apartment with cockroaches and unreliable electricity. The stress and public shame began devastating my mother's health. The confident woman who had dared to dream of partnerships gradually became hollow-eyed and broken. 3 months after that terrible gala, my mother collapsed while stocking shelves at a discount store. In the county hospital, as I sat holding her hand under harsh fluorescent lights, I made a promise that would define every day of the rest of my life. I was going to destroy Victor Blackwood. Not quickly, not obviously, but completely. The next several years were the hardest of my life. I threw myself into education with frightening determination, not just to get good grades, but to forge the weapon I'd eventually use against Victor. While my classmates worried about typical teenage problems, I was systematically studying his business empire, learning about commercial real estate, leveraged buyouts, the structural vulnerabilities in seemingly solid foundations. My mother's health improved somewhat, but something essential in her spirit had been permanently damaged. She found whatever work she could, but she never spoke of dreams again. That light in her eyes when she'd talked about her business plans had been extinguished forever. I graduated valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to business school. While other students enjoyed college life, I spent every spare moment understanding Victor's empire, mapping its weak points like a military strategist. 2 weeks before graduation, my mother passed away quietly in her sleep. Her final words to me were, "Don't let anger consume your soul, baby. Promise me you'll build something beautiful instead of something destructive." I held her hand and promised I would, but we both knew I was lying. At 22, I started my first company, software development for property management systems. It wasn't glamorous, but it was strategic positioning to infiltrate Victor's industry. The company exceeded projections, and I sold it for $12 million at 25. That was just the foundation. Over the next decade, I built and sold 4 more companies, each significantly larger than the last. But profit wasn't my primary motivation. Strategic positioning was everything. By 30, I controlled assets worth over $100 million and had assembled a ruthless team of lawyers, accountants, and advisors. More importantly, I had discovered Victor's critical weakness. His empire looked solid but was dangerously over-leveraged. Most properties were mortgaged to maximum values, dependent on complex refinancing and consistent rental income. Any significant disruption could trigger catastrophic collapse. I began implementing my strategy carefully. I started purchasing properties in Victor's markets, not competing directly, but establishing presence and studying his methods. Then I began offering his tenants better terms and service. The beautiful irony was that Victor actually began respecting me as a worthy competitor. At industry events, he'd seek me out for conversations about market trends. He saw me as ambitious, someone who reminded him of his younger self. If he'd known who I really was, he might have tried to destroy me before I became powerful enough to threaten him. But he didn't know. To Victor, I was simply Cameron Williams, the successful tech entrepreneur who'd moved into real estate. He had no reason to connect me with the cleaning lady he'd humiliated 15 years earlier. When I turned 35, I controlled a $2 billion portfolio. The 2023 economic downturn provided exactly the opening I'd been waiting for. Commercial real estate values plummeted, and Victor's leveraged empire began showing serious instability. That's when I struck with full force. I systematically acquired debt on Victor's most valuable properties. When banks wanted to reduce exposure to risky loans, I was there with cash offers, purchasing his debt at substantial discounts. This gave me legal power to call in loans or initiate foreclosure proceedings. Simultaneously, I aggressively recruited his most valuable tenants with lease terms they couldn't refuse. Why pay Victor's premium rates when they could get superior space and service for less in a Williams-owned building? Victor tried desperately to fight back, but he was battling forces he couldn't understand. Banks that had once competed for his business suddenly avoided his calls. City officials mysteriously found regulatory issues with his projects. Within 18 months, Victor Blackwood went from confident billionaire to desperate man trying to save his life's work. That's when he took a step that would have been unthinkable at his peak. He requested a meeting with me. I'll never forget Victor walking into my office that day. He looked significantly older than his 68 years, his expensive suit unable to hide the weight he'd lost from stress. The man who had once commanded every room now appeared diminished, almost fragile. Cameron, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I'm going to be direct. I need your help. I leaned back and waited, letting silence stretch between us. I know we've been competitors, but I respect what you've built. You're smart, aggressive, and you understand this business. I'm prepared to offer you something I've never offered anyone, a full partnership. 30% of my remaining assets for the capital to stabilize my operations. The irony was absolutely perfect. Here was Victor Blackwood offering me exactly what my mother had requested decades earlier. That's an interesting proposal, I said carefully. But before we discuss business, I have a question. Do you remember a woman named Diane Williams? Victor's brow furrowed as he searched his memory. It sounds familiar, but I can't place her. Should I? She worked for you. Cleaned your house for about 6 months in 1998. Single mother working multiple jobs to support her son. I watched confusion grow in his eyes as he tried to understand why I was mentioning a former employee from 25 years ago. She approached you with a business proposal once, I continued, watching his face intently. Asked for a $50,000 loan to start her own cleaning company. Do you remember what you told her? The color began draining from Victor's face as memory slowly returned. I could see the exact moment when he remembered. The charity gala, the stage, the laughter, the cruel words. Oh my God, he whispered, barely audible. You're her son. Yes, I confirmed, my voice carrying 25 years of controlled rage. I'm her son. I'm the 8-year-old boy who watched his mother come home in tears that night. I'm the 12-year-old who held her hand in the county hospital. I'm the young man who held her as she died, still carrying the shame you placed on her. Victor's hands were visibly shaking as the full magnitude became clear. Cameron, that was so long ago. I was different then. I've changed. Have you? I interrupted, standing and walking to the windows. Because I've spent 25 years studying you very carefully. I've watched how you treat people you consider beneath you. My mother wasn't your first victim. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice cracking. I turned back to face him. I want you to understand what you took from her that night. You didn't just refuse her loan. You could have done that privately. Instead, Ian, you chose to humiliate her publicly, destroy her reputation, ensure she could never recover. You turned her most vulnerable moment into entertainment. I can't undo what happened, Victor said desperately. But I could establish a foundation in her memory. Fund scholarships. You think this is about money? I laughed, though there was no humor in it. This was never about money. This is about power, the power to destroy someone's life for entertainment, the power to decide who deserves dignity and who deserves humiliation. I returned to my desk, looking directly into his frightened eyes. Here's what's going to happen. I own the debt on every major property in your portfolio. I can simultaneously call in all those loans, triggering foreclosure proceedings that will leave you with nothing. Your reputation destroyed. Your legacy erased. Please, Victor begged, tears streaming. I have children, grandchildren. This will devastate my entire family. Like you devastated mine? The words came out harder than intended. My mother never recovered from what you did. She died believing she'd been foolish to dream of being more than a cleaning lady. Victor was sobbing openly now, understanding both what he'd done and what it would cost him. For 25 years, I'd fantasized about this moment, complete destruction, making him feel the despair my mother had endured. But looking at this broken old man, I realized something surprising. Total destruction wouldn't honor my mother's memory. You are going to lose everything, I said finally, my voice calm and measured. Your properties, your company, your fortune, all gone. But I'm going to leave you with one thing my mother never had, the opportunity to understand what honest work actually feels like. I pulled out a contract I'd had prepared. You'll work as maintenance supervisor in your former headquarters building. Minimum wage, 40 hours a week, taking care of property you once owned. You'll report to managers who used to work for you. Victor stared in disbelief. You want me to work as a janitor? I want you to learn what service means, I corrected firmly. My mother spent her life in service to others, and you told her that's exactly where she needed to stay. Now you'll discover what service really entails, not as punishment, but as education about the dignity of honest work. Victor looked at the contract for long moments, hands trembling. And if I refuse, then you get nothing. No mob, no income, no support. The choice is yours. With shaking hands, Victor Blackwood signed the contract that would define the rest of his life. That was 3 years ago. Victor still arrives at his former headquarters every morning at 6 o'clock to unlock doors, empty wastebaskets, and maintain the building that once symbolized his power. The tenants know who he used to be, but they treat him with basic respect, something he never showed my mother. I see him occasionally during property visits. He actually looks healthier now, less burdened by the weight of maintaining an empire. He's learned the security guards' names, asks about their families, seems genuinely interested in their answers. People who once feared him now share coffee with him during breaks. Last month, Victor asked to speak with me privately. We met in the same office where he'd once begged for mercy. I want you to know that I understand now, he said simply, his voice carrying quiet dignity I'd never heard before. I understand what I took from your mother, from so many others. The dignity that comes from honest work, from being valued for who you are rather than what you own. Do you really? I asked, genuinely curious. I spent my entire life believing that success meant being above other people instead of being useful to them. Your mother understood something I never grasped, that real worth comes from serving others well, not from being served by them. He paused, looking older but somehow more at peace. I can't give her back what I stole, but I think about her every day. I wish I could tell her how sorry I am. I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of closure. She would have known you were sorry. Even at the end, she wasn't consumed by anger. She just wanted me to build something beautiful instead of something vengeful. And did you? He asked quietly. I thought about my empire, built on revenge, but now sustained by principles my mother had tried to teach me. The affordable housing developments, small business loan programs, educational scholarships for kids who reminded me of my younger self. I'm still trying, I admitted honestly. Victor nodded slowly. She would be proud of the man you became, and proud that you chose to give me the chance to become someone better than I was. As I sit here today, looking out over a city where my name appears on buildings that once belonged to Victor Blackwood, I've come to understand that revenge and justice are fundamentally different. Revenge would have been destroying him completely, leaving him broken and hopeless. Justice was providing him the opportunity to understand what he'd done and become someone worthy of the second chance my mother never received. I still miss my mother every single day. I still wish she could have seen what we built from the ashes of her broken dreams. But I know she's watching, and I know she's proud, not because I brought down her enemy, but because I ultimately chose to lift him up after bringing him low. That's the crucial difference between revenge and justice. Revenge destroys everything it touches, including the person seeking it. Justice creates something better and more meaningful from the wreckage of what was wrong. This story proves that no matter how powerful someone seems, justice always finds a way to balance the scales. If this inspired you to never give up on your dreams, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories of triumph over adversity. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their struggles will lead to strength. What would you have done in my position? Let me know in the comments below. Remember, karma doesn't need your help to work. It just needs your patience.